Hello, dear students. As you can see that today I'm sharing a video with all of you on victimology. Victimology is a part of the paper which is prescribed in your syllabus, and that is Penology, Victimology and Forensic Science. I'm certain that in just 2-3 videos I'll be able to cover all the important aspects on victimology with all of you. I am Dr. Vibha Sharma, Associate Professor in Government Law College, Ajmer. So as we are aware that in every civilized country, a criminal commits the crime and the state apprehends the offender and brings him to trial, of course, whenever possible. Now, if he found guilty, then he is convicted and sentenced to undergo any form of punishment. Of course, we have been reading about the accused having a fair and just trial, that the guilty should be punished, the convicts and prisoners should be given humane treatment, the jail conditions should be improved, and the criminals should be given an opportunity to rehabilitate themselves in the society. But then, what about the victims? So, victimology actually brings to fore the particular requirements or aspects relating to the victims. So let's start knowing more about it in this subject of victimology. So of course, now starting with the subject of victimology. We need to understand that though the word victim has its roots in many ancient languages, and though many criminologists actually referred to the victims also in their various studies, but it was not until the time when Benjamin Mendelssohn, who is also known as the father of victimology, actually started with the concept of a science to study victims, and the word victimology was brought to fore by him in his early writings itself. So the term victimology was proposed in his article, A New Branch of Biopsychosocial Science, Victimology, which was published in 1956. It was actually in this article that he suggested the establishment of an international society of victimology. Okay, so quickly we will know about the change in the perspective from the earlier times to the modern times. So earlier, victims were considered as hapless dupes who instigated their own victimization. Later on, this particular view was vehemently criticized, and therefore this view was actually replaced by the notion of victim as anyone caught up in asymmetric situation, that is, in an exploitative, parasitical, oppressive, destructive situation of inherent suffering. And so now victim means an individual who experiences injury, loss, or hardship and suffering due to any reason or cause. Now, here we have to understand that in this sense, the victim actually can be anybody, not only a crime victim, but even a person who has suffered some injury, loss, or hardship, say due to tsunami or a natural disaster or anything like that. So then we should know as to what does we mean when we say a victim of a crime or a crime victim. So then we need to be very clear that when we refer to a crime victim, it actually means any person, group, or entity who has suffered injury or loss due to illegal activity of someone. Now, this crime victim can be the primary victim who himself or herself has suffered such injury or loss due to the illegal activity, or the crime victim can also be a secondary victim. That is to say, a relative of the primary victim or a person who suffers injury or loss due to the illegal activity of someone against this primary victim. Okay? So, the term victim in a legal sense can be defined as a person who has suffered direct or indirect loss, either physical, mental, emotional loss due to the act of another person called the offender. Now, we already know that by way of an Amendment Act in 2008, Clause WA was introduced in Section 2 of the Criminal Procedure Code of 1973. So now, victim is defined as, it means a person who has suffered any loss or injury caused by reason of the act or omission for which the accused person has been charged. And the expression victim includes his or her guardian or legal heir. Clear? So then, of course, the term victimology actually refers to a system of knowledge of victims. As you can see, that victimology is actually made up of two words, one Latin word and another Greek word. Latin word is victima, which means victim, and the Greek word is logos, which means a system of knowledge. And this term actually was coined by the father of victimology, and he is Benjamin Mendelssohn. Though the people had started focusing on the needs and the requirements of the victims as well, but it was not until 1985 when the United Nations General Assembly adopted a declaration which is called as the Basic Principles of Justice for Victims of Crime and Abuse of Power, that a proper structure was brought in place. Now, this declaration actually is being treated as a Magna Carta of rights of victims. It deals with problems of victims of crime or abuse of power, and it underlines the principle that the victims are to be treated with respect and dignity. The main principles of the declaration are these. We will just go through them one by one. The first one is victims are entitled to the mechanism of justice and proper redress for the harm. The victims should be informed about the right to seek redressal for any harm suffered. The oscillation procedure be adopted to redress the grievances of the victim. And restitution and compensation should be part of the sentencing in criminal trial. If the offender is not able to pay the compensation adequately, the state shall pay the compensation. And it is also provided in the declaration itself that for this purpose, the state shall have a national fund. It is also found that this declaration provides that the redressal system, whether formal or informal, should be such so that the matter is taken up expeditiously, fairly, it should be inexpensive, and should also be easily accessible. And also that measures should be taken to minimize victims' inconvenience, protect their privacy wherever needed, and also ensure safety, including of their families and the witnesses. Okay? Nature of victimology and its expanding dimensions is the final aspect that I would be sharing with all of you today in this video of mine. As you can see, I have used hexagons to cover the nature and expanding dimensions of victimology. The reason is it would be easy for you to differentiate between the nature of victimology and the expanding dimensions of victimology from earlier times to later times, that is recent developments. Okay. Now, here itself, it is important for us to know that at first, going back to the origins of criminology in the 1880s, anything resembling victimology was simply the study of crime from the perspective of the victim. And therefore, it was felt that a separate discipline is not required for victimology because they actually are already being covered under criminology. However, with the exception of some psychological profilers who do this, nobody really advocates this approach to victimology anymore. The scientific study of victimology can be traced back to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s when two criminologists, Mendelssohn, about whom I have shared with you in the very beginning of my video, and von Hentig began to explore the field of victimology by creating typologies. They are also together are considered as the fathers of the study of victimology. So these new victimologists, yes, they were called like that then, began to study the behaviors and vulnerabilities of victims, such as the resistance of rape victims and characteristics of the types of people who were victims of crime, especially murder victims. So then it is apparent to us that victimology is the scientific study of victims of crime. It is actually a sub-discipline of criminology. It has developed like this nowadays. Okay. So it seeks to study the relationship between victims and offenders. This is the place from where it all started actually, since B. Mendelssohn, who actually is credited with being the first to study the relationship between the victim and the doer, that is the offender, and taken together, he termed the two as the penal couple. In his victimology, he focused his attention on the possible role of the victim and the circumstances surrendering him in the commission of the crime. This is where we actually started. He identified four factors in the context of the crime of rape and other offenses against morality which could be responsible for lessening of the resistance on the victim's part. He said that those factors are: 1. The familial, authoritative, or hierarchical relations existing between the accused and the victim. 2. The temperament of the victim, which may obscure the reasoning faculty. 3. The liberative social surroundings of the victim. And 4th, the superiority of the social milieu of the accused in relation to that of the victim. Starting from here, later on, it was also realized that there are actually some persons who are especially vulnerable to crime. They are child victims, women who are vulnerable to crime, then a particular section in the society, and they actually realize that there are different groups which exist within the society itself who are being victimized. So the victimology also focused on these groups of people as well. Then it studies the interactions between victims and the criminal justice systems, that is, the police and the courts and corrections officials. It also studies the connections between victims and other social groups, including the societal reactions to crime and to the victims. It also studies the connections between the victims and the institutions, such as the media, business, and social movements. And of course, recently it has again expanded and has started putting focus on the compensatory remedy for victims as well. So thus, victimology as a branch of criminology encompasses the study of victimization, victim-offender relationships, victim and the offenders. As such, when we study the particular victims of a crime, then victim and criminal justice relationship, victim and societal reactions, victim and the media relationship, and of course, compensatory remedy for victims as well. So now we very well know that the aim of victimology as a science is to help such sufferers of crime and remove the social confusion by addressing to the problems of victims of crime. It is a relatively new area which is considered as a field of specialization within criminology. In other words, criminology encompasses within it the study of lawmaking, lawbreaking, and societal reactions to lawbreaking, whereas victimology forms a part of specialized study in the field of societal reaction to lawbreaking. Okay, so I really hope that in this video, these aspects which I have covered have really clarified certain concepts for all of you. Exams are going on. All the very best to all of you. And of course, take very good care of yourselves. Thank you so much for listening to this video. God bless you always. Thank you.